Everybody hates context why Deuteronomy 28 is not about the transatlantic slave trade. Some people say Deuteronomy 28 is a prophecy about the transatlantic slave trade. They point to one verse, Deuteronomy 28:68, and say, "See ships, slavery, that's us." But when you actually read the text, the interpretation falls apart. Deuteronomy 28:68 says, "The Lord will bring you back to Egypt in ships. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you." Notice the problem immediately. The verse says no one will buy you, but the transatlantic slave trade was built on mass purchasing. Over 12 million Africans were bought, sold, and transported. That is the exact opposite of what the verse predicts. Second, the text says back to Egypt. Egypt is a real historical place. It was the land of Israel's original bondage. For an Israelite, being sent back to Egypt meant the ultimate humiliation, returning to the very house of slavery God delivered them from. The Americas are not Egypt, and if Egypt is just a symbol for any place of slavery, then why would it only mean the Americas and not the dozens of other places Africans were enslaved throughout history? Third, look at the context. Deuteronomy 28 is a covenant chapter. It lists blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. The curses include agricultural failure in the land, enemy sieges, cannibalism during invasions, disease from Egypt, and scattering among all nations. These are not vague predictions. They describe what would happen to Israel in their own land if they broke the covenant. And historically, that is exactly what happened. The northern kingdom was conquered by Assyria. Judah fell to Babylon. Jerusalem was destroyed by Rome, and the Jewish people were scattered among the nations. That is the historical fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28. Finally, look again at verse 68. It says they would return to Egypt by a route God said they should never travel again. That is a direct reference to the Exodus. It makes perfect sense to ancient Israelites. It makes no sense as a prophecy about the Atlantic Ocean 2,000 years later. So to make Deuteronomy 28 about the slave trade, you have to ignore the covenant context, ignore the historical setting, ignore the rest of the chapter, and ignore the phrase, "no one will buy you." That's not interpretation. That's selective reading. Deuteronomy 28 is about Israel under the Mosaic covenant, not the transatlantic slave trade. And once again, the problem isn't the Bible. The problem is taking verses out of context. If you want more biblical clarity like this, like, share, and subscribe.